Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Susan Burns, and I'm an associate chair here in the School of Civil and Environmental Engineering. And it is really my great pleasure to welcome you to our 2024 Spring Hyatt Lecture. This is a leadership series that was endowed in 2015 through the generosity of civil engineering alum Ken Hyatt. Today, we mark the 18th Hyatt Lecture here in the school, and it is our great honor to welcome two of the most internationally distinguished names in academic leadership, Dr. Wayne Clough and Dr. Jean-Lou Chameau. Our talk today will take the form of a fireside chat with Dr. Clough moderating questions for Dr. Chameau. It is my great pleasure today to first introduce Dr. Clough, President Emeritus of Georgia Tech and former Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution. It is also notable that Dr. Clough was our very first Hyatt lecturer in the school, and he's a two-time civil engineering alum of Georgia Tech, studying with the legendary George Sowers. After completing his master's, he went on to the University of California, Berkeley, where he earned his PhD. Throughout his career, Dr. Clough rapidly ascended to academic leadership positions in some of the most distinguished schools in the country, ultimately becoming the first alum to serve as president of Georgia Tech in 1994. Dr. Clough's distinctions are indeed too numerous to name, but to highlight a few, he is a member of the United States National Academy of Engineering. He has received some of the most distinguished honors that can be bestowed by the American Society of Civil Engineers, and he has held multiple presidential appointments, including serving on the U.S. President's Council for Science and Technology, as well as the National Science Board. And it is our great pleasure to have him here. Welcome, Dr. Clough, and thank you so much for joining us. And now it is my great honor to introduce our 2024 Spring Hyatt Lecturer, Dr. Jean-Lou Chameau. Dr. Chameau earned his undergraduate engineering degree from the École Nationale Supérieure d'Art et Métiers, pardon my French, as well as a degree in economics from the Sorbonne. After that, he came to the United States and earned his PhD in civil engineering from Stanford University. After graduation, he joined the faculty at Purdue University, but fortunately for us, he saw the light and soon came to Georgia Tech, where he became school chair in 1991. At Tech, he went on to serve as a Georgia Research Alliance Eminent Scholar, Vice Provost for Research, Dean of the College of Engineering, and Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs. He served for 7 years as the President of Caltech and served for 4 years as the President of the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, from which he retired in 2017. While Dr. Chameau's accomplishments are also far too many to name, I will highlight that he is a member of the U.S. National Academy of Engineering, the French National Academy of Technologies, and in his native France, he was elected Knight of the Legion of Honor, which is the highest distinction that can be bestowed for civil accomplishments. The immortal memoirist and poet Maya Angelou once said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And while I firmly believe this is true, I also believe that in this case, Jean-Lou is one of the exceptions who proves the rule, because people very clearly remember both what he said and did, but also how he made them feel. When he arrived as school chair in 1991, civil engineering, before we were civil and environmental engineering, and Georgia Tech were known for their strong regional undergraduate programs, but had very little or relatively little reputation at the graduate level. What followed over the next decade was a truly astonishing transformation of our program into one of national and international reputation, much of which can be attributed to Jean-Lou's ability to see the world differently. As a leader, he has a gift of vision that allows him to see synergy where other people cannot, to make seemingly small adjustments that result in a remarkable change in direction, both from individuals and from organizations. He thrives on an entrepreneurial spirit that is fueled by the curiosity of a scientist, but balanced with an engineer's appreciation of practical application, all of which is made possible by his tremendous and seemingly unlimited capacity for hard work. He also has a strong appreciation of the importance of relationships. But to Maya Angelou's main point, I graduated from Georgia Tech 7 months before Jean-Lou arrived on campus. And even to this day, I can still remember the excitement his impending presence brought to us. In preparation for his arrival, the atmosphere in the school was electric, transforming to one of excitement and anticipation. He inspired in other people a feeling of hope and optimism that we could indeed accomplish anything we set out to do. And time has proven that his optimism was grounded, as it was followed by a lifetime of truly remarkable results. And I cannot think of a more distinguished model of leadership for us to emulate. So I'm very pleased to invite you to join me in welcoming both Dr. Chameau and Dr. Clough for our 2024 Hyatt Lecture.
Thank you very much, Susan. Jean-Lou?
Could we end now, given the introduction? Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to be with you this morning for the Hyatt Lectureship and to be with my good friend, longtime friend, and my colleague, Jean-Lou Chameau, to talk about leadership. And as he titles it, Leadership from the Ground Up. And we want to plumb his thoughts about what it means to be a leader, particularly if you have an engineering background. Jean-Lou and I go way back. He was a student at Stanford in the 70s when I was a young faculty member, and we got to know each other. I don't want to date us too much, but the Apple +2 computer had just come out, so that would give you some idea at the time. I was very fortunate to have Jean-Lou in my undergraduate class and then to serve as an advisor for his engineer's degree and his PhD degree. For those of you in the audience, having a student like Jean-Lou was really a pleasure. My job was really not to do anything to hold him back because he was a lot smarter than I was. After he finished his PhD, he left my orbit and went to Purdue, as Susan mentioned, and put his mark on the world without any input from me because he was that bright, and Georgia Tech was fortunate to get him back. I came to Georgia Tech as the president in 1994, and he left. I thought, but I hope I didn't cause that because he became the president of Golder Associates, one of the largest geotechnical firms president in the United States. So we can learn a lot from Jean-Lou because of all the different positions he's had as a leader. But Jean-Lou, let's get it started by talking a little bit about your childhood and how you grew up in France.
First, thank you, Susan and Gwen, for being so kind. It does surprise people often when they ask me that question. I come from a very humble background in France. My father was a construction worker, and we were not poor, but very humble family. The first one in my family who finished high school and then went to college. My father was moving from jobs to jobs, so when I was very soon, I became raised by my grandmother. So I could be in one school. My parents could see I was fairly good in school and I loved it. So I was raised mostly by my grandmother in a very humble way. She's a person who had suffered a lot during World War II, lost a husband, a son, and many members of the family. But she was a great person. I owe her a lot. She gave me, although we were very humble, values, taught me to respect people, to be humble, to care for people, and to work hard. She was making me work very hard. I always remember that. So I love school, and I was lucky to go to school. When I reached the age of 13, finally, I was able to move with my parents. They moved to a place in Normandy, in a small village. And my life there was to get up early morning, 10-minute bike ride, half an hour train ride, 20 minutes walk to go to school, and come back in the evening. On Saturday, I was working on a farm. During the summer, I was working on a farm to make a bit of money. And I loved it, and I loved school. Then I was lucky to go to college, and things happened after that. But I come from that background is that ground up, if you want, is very important to me because those values, I owe them to my grandmother.
So tell us a little bit about your decision to come to the United States and to come to Stanford. How did that happen?
Pure luck, because I was young and foolish. I was working on my engineering degree in a school in the north of France. And one day there is a man who comes to give a lecture, and he was introduced as having a PhD, in fact, from Caltech. And it was in computational fluid dynamics. Interesting lecture, but I didn't understand, I didn't know what that title meant. I had no idea about graduate school. You know, in my family, we didn't know about Stanford or Georgia Tech or Caltech or MIT. So at the end of the lecture, I go down the amphitheater and ask him, tell me what is this at PhD? He told me briefly. He was very busy, didn't want to spend some time with me, but he said, there is a place in Paris, you can find some information next to the US Embassy. 2 days later, I go to the US Embassy, I find that place, and I get those books from universities, you know, the programs, the curricula, and I look at those things, and it was not the internet days, so what I did is to write letters to a number of universities, MIT, Berkeley, Stanford, and a few others, Caltech. And I was lucky to be admitted. And I also was able to compete for a scholarship that I received. I didn't have any money. And why Stanford? It was close to San Francisco. I look at the map. It was, middle 70s. It was still the time of almost the hippie period. San Francisco was the place to go. And here I go. I worked the full summer to buy plane tickets on the least expensive plane I could find. Arrived in Oakland, California with $300 or $400, and that's it. No big thought. Okay, luck.
Well, it was great, good fortune for me, because I happened to be the recipient of his presence at Stanford when he came, and he actually took my undergraduate course, which surprised me. And I saw this guy sitting out there, and he took the first test, and I always asked an essay question, so his English wasn't quite there. And then the second one, I noticed his English was getting better, and the third one, I noticed his English was perfect. I said, is this guy getting help from somebody? No, he was just that smart. So that was the way it worked. This was a pleasure. You graduated from Stanford.
I'm going to stop you there.
Yeah.
I took his undergraduate course because in France, I had taken one course in geotechnical work and I hated it. And I said, okay, I need to try again. So I entered the School of Civil Engineering and Structural Engineering anyway. I took his course in undergraduate to see, maybe I was hoping it would be better than the one in France. And it was much better. And and then a few months later, I joined him. So luck again, because he was there at the right time for me.
Yeah. Well, the other thing he did that was unusual, he did an engineer's thesis there. Stanford really didn't do a master's thesis. And I had this project in San Francisco where you had to go down, whether excavating for a sewer, but they were going into this archaeologically very interesting place where earthquakes had occurred. And so it was going to be very grubby in the field kind of work. And so I knew Jean-Lou was mathematically very talented. And I said, well, Jean-Lou, I have this project. I don't think you'll be interested. He said, yes, I want to get my hands dirty. And he got his hands dirty, and it was a great experience. Okay, you finished at Stanford, and you took a faculty position at Purdue. And there you had colleagues of very high standing in the geotechnical field. They were all a little bit cantankerous, as I remember. Tell us a little bit about that Purdue experience and where you began to really think about leadership.
So I was again fortunate to be asked to be an assistant professor at Purdue, and I go to Purdue in a group of, it was a very large geotechnical engineering group there, one of the largest in the country with Berkeley and MIT. And I had 7 colleagues, all of them very senior faculty. I was the only assistant professor, and some extremely well-known members of the academy, and on and on and on. And they were always fighting. And so as a group, there was always bickering about this and that. They were doing great stuff, and the students receive a great education. And after a few years, I was doing my stuff. I was working with them and developing my programs. I had some great students too. One Friday, the chair of the department calls me in and he says, Jean-Lou, he said, I'm tired of your colleagues. They are like children and they are doing well, but the group is not doing as well as it should. And I want to put you in charge. And he said, on Monday, I will go and announce to them that you are going to be in charge. I had just been promoted to associate professor. I didn't expect to be in charge of that group. But you know, in those days, again, because I was naive or not smart enough, I said, yes, sir. I didn't ask for a pay raise. I didn't ask for anything. Yes, sir. Monday morning, 9 o'clock, he is there and tells them I will be, and he said, the reason it shows me, because you seem to be the only one that they are able to talk to and work with, all of them. So the following few years, I was still doing my research and teaching and so on. I was also in charge of that group. And I realized that I was doing some good. The group started to work better together. They developed joint programs, facilities, and so on. And also I realized something important that I would like to convey to you, that I enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing my research. I enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed the rewards of that. But I also was being very rewarded as a person by seeing people doing good things around me and knowing that I was helping a little bit. And that was rewarding me. And all of those young people who are here, if you will have opportunities to be in leadership position. But something I really encourage you to pay attention to, you do it if you really feel rewarded by it in terms of serving, because you will be serving those people, if you are not rewarded by it, keep doing your own thing. There is nothing wrong with it. But to engage into it, you have to be willing to serve and care about people and make it your priority compared to your own priorities.
So you came to Georgia Tech, and the civil engineering department at that time, I would say, was probably respected, but not seen as one of the top programs. So part of your work obviously was to try to advance the prestige of the department and bring it into a heightened thing. So how did you get at that, and what was involved in that?
I was approached by Georgia Tech, by the search committee at the time who were looking for a new chair, and one discussion led to another, and I came to Georgia Tech. During the process, I came several times to the campus here. I was still at Purdue to talk to faculty, including Dr. Barry Goodnow, who is standing there, and I realized that there was a group of very young faculty, assistant professors, also a group of mid-career faculty who really clearly wanted to get things done. And I felt there was a great people, great opportunity. And for a number of reasons, again, the department was not performing where it could have been, I believed. So I saw it as an opportunity to do something. And I also realized that people had great ideas, and very often the only thing that stopped them was, oh, we don't have the resources, or at Georgia Tech we cannot do this. You know, in academia, most of the time you ask and people say, oh no, we have never done that, it cannot be done. So I came to Georgia Tech, and Barry may remember my first presentation to the group, to the faculty. I had those days we had those slides you place, transparencies you place on the screen. And I had one at the end where I said, I used to have a student, Dr. Fernando Reyna, who had a problem with English. And sometimes he confused tenses between I can do, I could do, I would do, I should do, and so on. He was always confused. And my point to him very often, he was also, he used to procrastinate. And I say, Fernando, stop, just do it. And that was my point to the faculty. There are a number of things that we have in mind, and we strategize them, and we are going to do them. And it was easy, because then you let people do it, okay? To me, it is, if you empower people and give them confidence, they will do great things.
Good. And today the department's ranked #1, so he did a good job.
And you should know that it was not ranked at the time. It didn't appear in the top 25 at the time. And since my colleagues at Purdue said, "Are you crazy to go to Georgia Tech?" I said, "No, I'm not." And look at what you did. Not me. You did it.
So Jean-Lou took a time out and worked at Golder Associates, as I mentioned. And when I came in here as president of Georgia Tech and I was getting things organized the way I wanted to get them organized, I wanted to create a whole new way of looking at research and graduate studies. And I knew I needed somebody who had an innovative outlook on life. And I would provide a significant budget as I could to that person. And so I had a breakfast with Jean-Lou while he was still president of Golder. And I told him about this job and he got very quiet. And at first I thought, uh-oh, he's not going to say no. Fortunately, he said, "This appeals to me. I'd like to do this." And so he came back and made huge difference in my administration in that job and subsequently became Dean of Engineering. And then he became the provost. And I will just say one quick thing about that, because the thing we worried a little bit about him being provost was we were both civil engineers. Normally you split these jobs up by discipline, right? And then secondly, he had been my student. So it looked like, something's going on here. But everybody agreed he was the right guy and he proved that to be true. So Jean-Lou, tell us a little bit about that time and your work at Georgia Tech.
But if you want, Georgia Tech twice, but especially the time working with you, it is in my heart. It's a major part of my life. And many things happened, and I will go over a few. But I would like first to say what was exciting during those years working with Wayne and some people who were here was the team. And it relates from very much to leadership. There was a group of people assembled here. As Dean of Engineering, for instance, I had the great pleasure to work with a group of outstanding chairs of the different schools. One of them is here, Dr. Ron Rousseau, who was the chair of chemical engineering at the time. And when I attracted people, like a person like Gary Schuster, Dean of Science, I was involved in the hiring of Tom Galloway in architecture, a great team of people who really felt, okay, we have a great opportunity here to transform this place into one of the best in the world under the leadership of Wayne and his vision. So I would like to say that the team to me, and it was the same when I went to Caltech and elsewhere, it is the most important thing you do as a leader initially. And so that was extraordinary. The team, and also, we think about deans and chairs and so on. The other people, what I call very often the unsung heroes, people like Mr. Bob Thompson, who was in charge of finance and was an outstanding person. People like Robert Haley of the Focus Program for Diversity. A person like April Brown, who helped me as a Dean of Engineering. Mary Frank Fox and others when we started the advanced program for women and all those things. So those unsung heroes in a school of civil engineering, there was a person here called Buck Riggs in the construction program who really did most of the hard work to create the organization that we needed to have. So team is what comes to my mind when I think about Georgia Tech. Obviously, during that time under your leadership, the number of things done was amazing. You think of transforming a bit the education, having more research and international opportunities for students, the diversity initiatives we took, creating the bio-environmental molecular science complex that is a little bit my baby on that one. I take ownership of that one. It was a 2-page proposal given to him. And the first time he and I met, we said, we never find the money. I said, Wayne, look, don't worry. And he said, okay, let's do it. The moving to Tech Square, the expansion of the class, the computing facilities, nanotechnology, all those things. To me, comes to mind initiative like creating the biomedical engineering school and on and on and on. And I think that it was a time where you felt that if you provide the right environment, you help people get things, something that I think I would encourage anybody here who do leadership, try to minimize administration, minimize bureaucracy, get things done. I think it's always something very important to do as a leader. And to really, what you have just to do is to make people so that have big aspirations and make them feel that, yes, we will find the resources, yes, we will provide the environment. They will do it. And because most people like to do great things. So that's what the Georgia Tech time was clearly outstanding. My wife knows Carol is here, and she worked for Georgia Tech for 20 years. We met here. She knows that how hard it was for me to leave Georgia Tech to become the president of Caltech. And on a plane back to Atlanta from a trip to California, she convinced me to say yes to Caltech, but she had a tough time. Leaving Caltech, Georgia Tech was very hard for me. Yeah. And
well, we were lucky to have him. One of the things that Jean-Lou did extremely well was recruit top faculty to Georgia Tech. And so I would ask him about how he got this person to come to Georgia Tech, a very esteemed professor in the National Academy and so forth. And Jean-Lou did something that hardly anybody ever does. He went to see that person. He didn't call him on the phone. He didn't say, come and visit. Jean-Lou went to see that person and meet their family and try to figure out what he needed to do to get that whole family to move. And so I asked him about one particular faculty member. I said, how'd you get here? He said, well, you know, I followed my usual method. He said, the hard part was getting his sailboat moved here. So, okay, so Jean-Lou was offered a number of jobs before the right one came along, and that job was Caltech. And so being offered the job as president of Caltech was an extreme recognition of what Jean-Lou was doing and his capabilities, because it's obviously one of the nation's best universities, had been for many, many years. Tell us about Caltech.
First, I would like to say that I was offered a job. Never look for a job. I think do the right thing. Do the right thing where you are. And if you do the right thing, somebody will call you from the School of Civil Engineering at Georgia Tech telling you, you know, we need a new chair and maybe you should consider it. Or somebody will call you from a place like Caltech. So doing the right, and also I got the opportunity to become president of Caltech because of Georgia Tech, because of what had been accomplished here. I owe it to many people, to you and to people who are still here and other, because what the place had become, and I was a part of it, and it, people say maybe he can do some good there also. So I went to Caltech. Caltech was a great institution. It just happened that there had been some difficulties the previous few years. There was some tensions on the campus between the students and the administration, the faculty and the administration, and a few other things like that. Caltech has also the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. There was tensions with NASA, but it was for some reason, sometimes things don't work as well as they should have. And it was also some significant financial stress at Caltech. People are surprised. It was financial stress. And I guess they needed an engineer, a person, nuts and bolts person, to fix a few things. So that's why I'm the first non-scientist to become president of Caltech. So it was odd in a sense as a civil engineer. And but it is an amazing place. The students are jewels. The faculty are very exciting people. So it is, to me, the experience at Caltech was to quickly show that you can develop an organization, put a management practices in place to solve all of the tensions. And that was, it was easy. It was not easy, but to focus on that very quickly, to show some progress, and then communicate. I spent my first few months, I went to meet each faculty member in their laboratories, talking about what they were doing, all of them. I went to meet every groups on campus and talking to people to communicate again of what the institution was about and what it could do. The experience there was extraordinary in a sense that there is, compared to, and I know many universities and I spent, there is a place where, because maybe of the history of people like Richard Feynman and a few people like that, the faculty there and the students, they compete with themselves. There is no, I never saw any of some infighting. Sometimes you see in organization, people say, okay, I want to be the best. And this is an excitement. It is really exciting to be among a group like this. It is something I focused on very much at Caltech, and it came during a discussion like this with a Caltech professor, Dr. Ahmed Zewel, Nobel Prize in Chemistry, who passed away a few years ago. And Ahmed, during the discussion, said, we should be able to dream with focus and freedom. And my contribution to Caltech in many ways was to look for opportunities and resources for people to dream with focus and freedom. I worked, my job was to raise money, and I tried to raise as much money as possible that was free of attachment. Okay, you could do whatever you wanted with it to give people focus and freedom. At the same time, I don't want to give you the idea that being a leader in a place like this is easy, and yet you have only just to smile and talk to people. No, you have also to do the hard stuff. And in my case, the biggest hard stuff came in 2008 and 2009 during the major recession that everybody felt at the time. And one lesson learned that if you are prepared, even a crisis can be good to you. Again, talk about luck. In the summer of 2008, every year the leadership of Caltech, myself and the leaders, used to get together for retreats. And in that one, I said to them, let's spend half a day to think about what would we do if things got really bad. At the time, the recession was starting. There was a few situations that were difficult in the financial sector. I said, let's assume that the Dow Jones will drop to 6,000. It was at 11,000. I think the lowest point 6 months later was 6,300, so it was not far. And what will we do at Georgia Tech? At Caltech, I mean. And we, as a team, we put a plan together. And what happened in December of 2008, we put the plan into action. And I went to talk to everybody on campus again, telling them what we were going to do. There was a tough things we had to do, some budget reduction, laying off some people. And at the same time, I convinced them that we should look to the future and keep hiring. We were the only university in California and maybe in the US who kept hiring during that time. Okay, and to position ourselves even better. And it was, to me, the reaction of Caltech to that was extremely good, because people felt, yeah, we have to do hard stuff at the same time. We keep looking toward the future, but you have to be prepared. And that's something that sometimes we forget. When there are so many things going your way as a leader, you want to always take the time to think about what could happen, good and bad, in the future. Be prepared.
Very good. Talk to us a little bit now. In 2013, you are approached about becoming president of a completely different kind of university, a relatively new experimental university in Saudi Arabia, King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. So that must have been an interesting and tough decision, both for you and for Carol.
I was president of Caltech and been there for 7 years. And I was planning to be there for 2 or 3 more years. By the way, I say that because I don't believe you should be in this position too long. And there are some people who stay in position for 20, 25 years. I believe myself, my view, not too long. But Caltech was great, I love it. And suddenly I was approached to do something a bit very different. And I will tell you that the main reason I did it is because of the person, two reasons, I should say. First, the person who approached me. The person who approached me was Dr. Chuck Vest, who was the former president of MIT and was a member of the board of trustees of that new university in Saudi Arabia. He's a person, he was a mentor, I respect him very much. And he contacted me and he said, Jean-Lou, we would like to consider something unusual, but we believe you are the person who can do it. And also he told me, I will always remember it, and maybe crazy enough to do it. So that's what it was a compliment to me, calling me crazy enough to do it. And the other reason is what, it was in Saudi Arabia at the time, and it was a king who had decided that he was going to try starting to change the country and to move it into a different direction. And one of them, and it was at the time very, very difficult to do, and some people reacted very negatively to it, to create a university where for the first time, men and women will be allowed to be together in the same classroom, and men and women teaching together, studying together. And this is, we're in 2024, things have changed. But believe me, when it took place, it was not the case. And to create also an institution really of very high quality. Their model, the model was designed by the group in Washington called the Washington Group. Their model was based on MIT, Georgia Tech, and Caltech. So interestingly, and they came to Georgia Tech to visit during that process. So it was, Carol and I went to visit, and it was hard to say no when you realize that you can do something that is very important for a particular country, but a country also that is important to the world and to a society where you can be a wedge for change. It was very hard to say no. A mentor of mine too, Dr. Cy Remo, who you don't know who Cy Remo is. Cy was the founder of TRW. He's a founder of the missile system in the US, founder of the National Academy of Engineering. He was 96 when he became a friend of mine. And Cy Remo told me, you have been at Caltech for a number of years. You have done everything we expected. Go and do something else that can be even more important than Caltech in the future. It was hard to say no. And so we took the advantage, and I give credit for Carol who went with me. But to give you an idea of what that meant to me the following few years, I'll give you an example. The first Saudi person who received a PhD at CAS, at university, was not a Saudi man, it was a Saudi woman. And for the first time, there was a woman who was on the stage receiving a PhD from me, and national TV was there. And also you fast forward now, when Carol went to a university in Saudi Arabia during her first visit called KFUPM. It is the largest engineering university there, very well-known one, and it was only men. And an exception was made for her. It was the first time in decades that a woman had been on that campus. It was a huge auditorium like this one, and she was the only woman. You fast forward, in this university, this coming fall, if not this fall, but next fall, there will be more women entering that university than men as in a freshwoman class. So quite, and it seems crazy, but at the time it was really crazy, but it could have been so easy to remain a few more years at Caltech, and okay, it is hard to beat, okay, Pasadena, California, and the environment there, but it was something unusual to do, and I'm very pleased that we did that. Thank you, Carol. Carol, my wife is a Georgia Tech graduate, and we met on this campus, and she was running the Center for Sustainable Technology and other centers at Georgia Tech, and was also Associate Vice Provost for Dr. Charlie Leota, that you may remember, yeah.
Yeah, I think Carol missed Georgia Tech basketball most, but okay, we're going to open the program up to the audience for Q&A for Jean-Lou, and so I think we're going to have some folks who will bring microphones around if you have a question.
Yes. So if you guys have a question, please come to whichever end of the row is closest to you, and one of the three facilitators will be happy to hand you a mic. Please make sure to speak up and into the mic so that everyone in the audience can hear you. But yes, we will take questions now.
Need somebody to start.
Hi. I wanted to know, were there times when it felt impossible to do, and how did you get yourself remotivated in those situations?
I appreciate your question very much. Because in fact, it's when you talk like this, and you have two old guys here who are very happy with what they have done. Yeah, there are many times where it's hard, and times where you feel it's impossible. You know, I mentioned that 2008 financial crisis that really affected us very negatively at the time, and I can tell you, I made it look easy, but there are times where I didn't sleep at night, and things looked quite impossible, and it's and to deal with it, I don't have any good advice. It's to really feel, you know, I come up with this idea of serving. Even if I didn't sleep at night, I got up in the morning, and my role was not to be wavering in front of people. It's to be very honest with them, telling them what the situation was, what we could do about it. And so my advice is to remain focused on what your role is, and always think about ultimately it is that counts, the people in front of you. So. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Chameau and Dr. Clough, for that very nice discussion. Dr. Chameau, I really attached on to your advice to leaders within organizations to just do it. I really like that. But I was curious to know your thoughts on how does the opposite culture develop within an organization? A culture of not doing it, of being paralyzed by some other fear or something. I just wonder what your thoughts are on that.
I think I don't have it. It varies from organization to organization, but I think it's easy to especially when something works well, to be in a mode. Yeah, you keep doing it, and maybe not paying attention sometimes as to how the world is changing around you. And I mentioned that in my remarks, trying to always think ahead. There is also in academia, especially, I have to say, it's easy to let bureaucracy, paperwork, administration take over. And that, I can tell you, at Georgia Tech, we worked very hard on that with Wayne to minimize that. And at Caltech and at CARS, I was pushing those things. It's easy to be in a system where the system becomes more important than the people. And that I'm from the opposite view. No, but there is no universal way on how those things happen. But it's you have to pay attention to it. I believe it's easy not to even notice it, that things are not moving, are not doing as well as they could do. And it's always good to bring new people from the outside with different views. When I was mentioning about the team that Wayne developed here at Georgia Tech, some members of the team had been here for many, many years. Okay, and they're doing very well, and they were great for the team, but also brought people with different views to, as a leader, to listen to people, because sometimes you listen. Sometimes you don't pay attention yourself that things are not maybe working the way they should. But
I just wanted to know what made you choose civil engineering as your discipline, and then additionally, later on in your career, you went back into academia, and like what made you want to come back in that field?
no, the first civil engineering, my degree, several major engineering schools in France are a bit, I would call it generic engineering. When I finished my engineering degree, I was a bit of a mechanical engineer, a bit of an industrial, a bit of an electrical. I had done some structural work. In those days, the finite element method was becoming of age, in the 70s. So I was a generic engineer. I came to, I selected civil engineering at Stanford, not because of Wayne Clough, I met him, but because I had written a paper when I was finishing my degree, again, on the structural element method in structural engineering. I said, why not try that? When I arrived in California, I discovered that there were earthquakes there. I didn't know that. And I found earthquake engineering exciting. Okay, a very complex topic, and at the time, it was still not as advanced as it is now. So I loved that, and then I discovered the dirt, the soil, the geotechnical part of it. So that's the way it happened. And I always liked. No, I told you I worked. Maybe I didn't say. I worked on construction site during the summer when I was in France to make some money. So it happened that way. In terms of good question, in terms of I had the chance to be in charge of a consulting firm that still exists, still doing very well. And it was not a huge firm, but about 2,000 employees, and mostly masters and PhDs. And it was exciting too. And by the way, I forgot to mention, I learned a lot in terms of actually what it is to run a business. When you actually every Friday night, every Saturday, you receive information about how the past week was and where is your cash flow and everything. I learned some management skills that became very useful to me subsequently here and elsewhere. And it was exciting. I loved it, and it was a very, again, I had good people, and you have to empower them. You have to help them. I found the business world to be very exciting to me, and at the same time, and clearly, my heart was more in academia, in research, than in running that company. And when I was contacted by Wayne, and at the time there was a dean of engineering, Dr. John White, also contacted me with, and I said, okay, I have to go back. It was so exciting, and especially we didn't go into it, but what Wayne asked me to do initially to try to restructure a bit the graduate education and all those large interdisciplinary centers and so on. I found that to be very exciting. What he didn't tell me at the time, it was just before the Olympics, and also my job when I arrived was to find a way to decommission the nuclear reactor that Georgia Tech still had in those days. That was not an easy task, sir. We won't go into that, but as part of the Olympic deal that Georgia Tech had made before you arrived, we had to decommission and remove a nuclear engineering center that we had where the nanotechnology building has been built. So he didn't tell me that. That was a minor issue I had to deal with.
Thank you, Dr. Chameau and Dr. Clough. That's one.
Wayne, I really enjoyed your book, Making it a Technological University. And I'm wondering if, Jean-Lou, if you thought of committing your experience or using your experience to paper, publishing something in a similar vein. You want to repeat the question?
Exactly. Both of us have led technological university and have done relatively well doing it. If we have thought about writing a book, you're the book writer, about those experiences. Won't you answer the question?
Okay, well, I didn't intend to write a book about my time as president at Georgia Tech, but I stumbled into it. I'd started writing books when I was at the Smithsonian, and I enjoy it. I'm writing a book now about the Georgia coast, which I'm really enjoying doing. And you learn a lot when you write a book. But when I came back to Georgia Tech, Bud Peterson asked me to help him with a few issues that he had, and I thought those were good things to do, particularly to get involved with climate change in a big way. And so we organized to do that. But in the course of that, I would talk to students and they would ask me, what did you do during your time as president of Georgia Tech? And I thought about that. And the odd thing was that the last history of Georgia Tech had been written in 1985. And that was the centennial year for Georgia Tech. And so Bob McMouth and his colleagues wrote a book, a very fine book, about the history of Georgia Tech. I had no intention of writing another history of Georgia Tech, but it dawned on me that it might be useful to document the idea about what I thought were the most important decisions I made, the ones that had the most profound impact. And the good news was I'd been away from Georgia Tech for quite a while. I was at the Smithsonian and then here as part-time. And then the other thought was somebody's going to write this book and tell them what they thought I did. I said, well, first I'm going to tell them what I think I did. And then they can write over what they want to write, right? So the book I wrote was really about 8 decisions that I made that I think had a profound effect on Georgia Tech. And of course, having great colleagues like Jean-Lou and others work with me as a team, I could not have done it without them. And so I wrote it, and all the proceeds, if you buy the book, go to Georgia Tech scholarships. So I'm not hawking the book for that purpose, but I enjoyed writing. And the other thing I realized, Barry, and you would relate to this a little bit, is that some of us are getting a little older. And so I interviewed probably about 40 people for that book. And I realized, first of all, they knew more about what was going on at Georgia Tech than I did, because I was out raising money most of the time. So there were things happening that I didn't have a good grasp on. And in addition, I realized a couple of people I wanted to interview had passed away, and one had dementia. So I'd lost that opportunity. So this was an opportunity for me to talk to people who had a profound understanding of what was going on and to document that for a real historian. And I know Dr. Cabrera's expecting to have a new history of Georgia Tech to be written. I worked on a committee for him, and that was a recommendation of the committee. It's important to do it ever so often, because you're going to lose your witnesses who saw history happen.
Very short answer. Here is my book. two pages. I started writing 2 pages, and I stopped at this stage because I hate leadership book where it is a long list of do this, do that, and I have an idea. It will be better. It is about anecdotes, things that took place. But anecdotes involve people. And I don't know how to write it because those people exist, still many of them. And the book is good that they still exist. So I have a tough time. You know what the title of my book is about? Leadership Matters. But there is a subtitle, and I will not say anything about it. You will have to think what I mean. The subtitle, are you the fire hydrant or the dog or both? And as a final remark on leadership, and I think leadership matters, and that's why I have this quote from Dr. Chuck Vest. Now, I had the chance to work with Wayne, and he has been my mentor. He was his PhD student and my president and so on. And I owe him a lot, but I also owe him a lot to this gentleman, Chuck Vest, with all due respect to Wayne Clough, was likely the best university president of the past 25 years in this country at MIT. And Chuck was a humble leader and who acted with confidence. I'm not trying to use him as to give you the traits of the leadership, but could also admit errors. He listened to people, he encouraged them, he inspired them to do important things that matter. He also looked at what was coming next, both the opportunities and challenges. And most importantly, he was always making sure that the institution and its people were true to the values of MIT, and he acted with utmost integrity. He was a friend and a mentor, and I would like to end with this quote from him. There is no better way to describe the value of great research university and their importance to discovery, innovation, and prosperity. Thank you.
Yep. I should mention Chuck Vest is also a good friend of mine, and we work closely together. And some people would often ask me, how did an engineer get to be secretary of the Smithsonian? Because I was the first engineer to be secretary of the Smithsonian. And I didn't quite say it that way, but Chuck Vest was behind it because he knew several of the board members at the Smithsonian. And he said, this guy is an engineer, yes, but he has the capability to think and be empathetic and work with people. And so Chuck had a hand in my getting that job
let me add to this, because sorry, we take too much time, but those are cute stories. When he was being considered for the Smithsonian, the search committee, they contact me. I'm the president of Caltech at the time. Interesting for me to be a recommendation for my former PhD advisor. And it was on the phone. It was not video. It was, and I would listen to them. They explained what they were looking for and so on. And clearly, some members of the committee had a tough time with this idea of an engineer becoming in charge of the Smithsonian. And finally, those that I could sense were not very supportive of the idea. I told them, look at all the things you told me you want that person to do. And I said, this is what engineers do. Okay, so hire him, and you will, and it will work, and it will work out. Same vein, when mentioned that when he appointed me as provost, there was some concern on campus. Two civil engineers. And at the time, the Dean of Science, Dr. Gary Schuster, said to his faculty in science or in a faculty meeting, I love engineers. They solve problems. So.
Thank you very much.
Yes.